Yes, we are recording. Thank you, Jose. My name is Steve Jurch. I'm the Director of Policy Practice and Research from ACCT, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jose Miranda, who's a Senior Government Relations Associate, and we have our fantastic consultants from Seattle Jobs Initiative who are going to be facilitating this second of 4 webinar series. And today our topic is going to be serving people or participants via SNAP ENT. And so I want to just give a couple of introductions, and then I will turn it over to Seattle Jobs Initiative. And Jose is going to fill in any gaps that I leave out. So from SJI, we have Susan O'Callahan, Bob Thibodeau, Bree Wen, and Natasha Bennett. And so they have been working with us on a project through the APHSA. And from that organization, we have Brandy Weissman and Mary Nelson who work to facilitate this project. And it's all about creating a community that improves SNAP ENT utilization. So I'll have some closing comments as well, but we do actually have a guest speaker today from Lorain County Community College, Marissa Vernon White, and she'll be joining us sort of halfway through to share some of her experiences and contribute to this webinar. So Jose, if I have not missed anything, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Susan and Bob.
Just real quick, Steve, I also want to acknowledge in attendance our new Vice President of Public Policy, Carrie Warwick-Smith. She's joining us. I'm really excited to have her, but she's joining us here today just to get a sense of what the project looks like and our cohort. Carrie, if you wanted to say a few words.
Thanks, Jose and Steve. Hello to everyone. It's great to be connected, at least remotely here. I'm looking forward to participating more on this project and to getting to know your institutions, and the work. Steve and I were just chatting. We're both in week 4 here at ACCT, so it's great to be on board and working on this project with you. Thanks, Jose.
And I hope Carrie doesn't hold it against me. She is my boss, so I apologize for not introducing you.
Not
today,
at all.
So.
On with the show.
And with that, we'll turn it over to Bob and Susan.
Thank you, Jose. So this is just our agenda. And again, I'm Susan, and I'm going to start this session, and then my colleagues, Bree and Natasha, will join for a couple slides, and then and Bob will kind of finish it off with Marissa. So we're going to start with just a very quick kind of context set, like where are we coming from? What was our last session about? And move into talking about serving people. So we're going to share some characteristics of just in general of SNAP ENT participants. And, you know, we really want you to start thinking about how it overlaps with students that you serve in your colleges, and really see the connection that these are the same people often. We're going to talk about how college students can benefit from SNAP ENT. We're really focusing a lot on connecting your students and your SNAP ENT participants to the benefits they need, namely SNAP, which is key for eligibility for SNAP ENT, but also really speaks to the food security issue that we know is present on college campuses. We'll talk a little bit about the role that colleges can play in SNAP ENT and why they're such key partners in SNAP ENT. And then also just discuss a little bit how colleges can partner with their local SNAP agency. Obviously, that's a really important aspect of being a SNAP ENT provider, but also then when we kind of circling back to this topic of really creating access for your students, that's an important piece too. So we'll get started. Next slide, please. So this is just to kind of look back on what we've talked about so far. So our last session, we really talked about how do your services and what you do at colleges, how do they align with SNAP ENT and how they align so well with SNAP ENT. And so this chart in the left column lists out what we call SNAP ENT components or the services that are allowed under SNAP ENT. And then the right-hand column lists out all the things that you do on college campuses every day and how they line up with these SNAP ENT components. So that's what we got into last session, and just to kind of take stock of what you've learned so far. And now we're going to kind of pivot to talk about the people that are participating in SNAP ENT. Next slide, please. And again, we really want to make sure that we're addressing the topics that you responded in the survey and said that were of interest. And so this session really speaks to recruiting students and enrolling students and giving them access. And so really, and I think we really have a heavy emphasis on creating that access for the students, having a sense of that the people who could benefit from SNAP ENT are likely on your campus already. And so really making that connection. Next slide, please. So we use this diagram to talk about kind of the ideal sort of alignment for SNAP ENT requires sort of the merging of all these different elements. And so being able to, know that you have the right participants, those who are SNAP ENT eligible and would benefit from SNAP ENT. That's what we're focusing on today. Next slide. So at the highest level, who's eligible for SNAP ENT? SNAP recipients who are receiving SNAP in the month that they participate in a SNAP ENT activity. They cannot be receiving TANF cash assistance. And employment has to be sort of the end goal and has to be sort of a positive outcome for that individual and a feasible outcome for that individual. So those are that's the basic criteria for SNAP ENT eligibility. Some other things to remember that are unique to SNAP ENT, there are no participation limits. And states can operate programs where SNAP ENT participation is a condition of their SNAP benefits, or they can offer a program where any eligible SNAP participant could volunteer and be a part of a SNAP ENT program. And those are things to consider when, depending on what state your college is in, that can have ramifications on some of the administrative requirements and the support that participants need to maintain their benefits. Not something that we're going to get into a lot today, but something that might come up when you're getting more individualized support in the cohort. Next slide, please. So I'm going to share some information that was provided through a study that was funded by Food and Nutrition Service, who administers SNAP ENT. And they worked with Mathematica to survey work registrants and SNAP ENT participants. And it's really to understand kind of who are SNAP ENT participants, what are their characteristics, how do they compare from to sort of this larger group of SNAP ENT eligible SNAP recipients. And they really wanted to understand the needs and challenges of SNAP ENT participants and work registrants, and understand the characteristics and available services of SNAP ENT providers. So they surveyed participants. They also surveyed providers. And a lot of the data that we're going to show here is actually from the provider's perspective. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So the first thing to just get a sense of, and again, think about this in how it overlaps with your student population. The thing that we're hoping you kind of see is that, these are folks that are on your campus already. Their characteristics are there's going to be overlap with the folks that are in your schools already. But we see here, as far as gender goes, it leans a little bit male if we're talking about everybody who's eligible for SNAP ENT and those who are actually participating. The ratio of female to male is a little bit lower. When we look at, race and ethnicity, there's a slightly larger representation of African Americans in SNAP ENT participation than overall work registrants. So again, just kind of look at these characteristics and think about how they sort of compare to what you know on your campuses. Next slide, please. Educational attainment, something to just highlight here. We know that education is a need for SNAP ENT participants. Most have not gone past high school, so that's a huge opportunity and just one of the reasons why colleges are such an important sort of stakeholder in SNAP ENT. Next slide, please. And something to note here that I think is important is, we're looking at folks who are unemployed at the time of survey. They were surveyed, but they had attachment to the labor force recently. So this isn't folks necessarily who are long-term unemployed. It could be, but we're looking at folks who haven't been able to get to a place in their employment where they're steadily employed or employed in a way that they actually, they have income sufficient to not be eligible for benefits. So we're really looking at people who need that next step in skills training and meeting their basic needs and those support services to really get to that next level where they're employed and able to have economic mobility. Next slide, please. And then some of the skills that were indicated by providers, soft skills are always super high. This really speaks to the importance of kind of wraparound support, connections maybe to other community services that your students might need. And then that need for those basic skills, which is a great opportunity for SNAP ENT on college campuses. Next slide. And then looking at, barriers to employment, again, those basic skills or employability skills, work experience. This is again reflected in providers' responses. And this kind of then matches up with if your work experience is spotty, even though it might be recent, or if it's isn't really getting you to that next level. This is sort of indicated here. And then, yeah, that's fine. No, go ahead and advance. I want to make sure I move through these quickly enough so that we can get to the other stuff. So some other things to consider when we're talking about SNAP participants. And again, we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper into the experience specifically for college and students. We think about folks who are experiencing food insecurity. So that's really how they're coming to the SNAP agency, is they're seeking food assistance. And that's really what they're looking for. And that might be their immediate need. Experiencing food scarcity, financial stress. They might be worried about the stigma of receiving, welfare or any public benefits. They might be worried about sharing private information. They may have really valid reasons or that they're worried about being kind of in the system. They might not be aware of what is required to participate in SNAP ENT, and they might already be connected to other social services. So they may have already sat down and shared all of their personal information with another worker, and then they're kind of doing this all over again. So that's just kind of some context to think about when somebody's applying for SNAP or seeking food assistance. Next slide, please. And then to kind of focus in on what that looks like for students, I'm highlighting this study that was conducted by the Hope Center. This is a report on basic needs and security during the pandemic. And again, you know, how the pandemic, you know, kind of exacerbated everything that we already know is a challenge for students and for SNAP eligible individuals. They found that 39% of those that they surveyed from two-year institutions were facing food insecurity. 48% were facing housing instability. And then among those that that were indicated in facing any sort of basic needs insecurity, 52% hadn't applied for supports, and simply because they didn't know how. And so that is just kind of the thing that we want to really highlight here is it's about creating access. It's not necessarily about not having eligible people. They're out there. It's they need to be connected. And you can, in that slide, there's the link to that full study if you want to learn more about what they revealed in that study. Next slide, please. So kind of talking about these obstacles to participation, this is really framing it around SNAP eligibility and SNAP E&T eligibility. These are some of the reasons why somebody might not be eligible for SNAP E&T. Again, you know, those high level eligibility criteria, you can't be receiving TANF, or you're not assessed as being able to work by the SNAP agency, you're not considered a work registrant. And then some other things, you know, your income would be too high. You might live in a facility that provides meals. But some of these things like confusion over address, haven't completed the application steps. Those are things that can be addressed, right? And maybe the intervention can help alleviate some of those ineligibility reasons or non-compliance. So, and I'm gonna go to the next slide, and we're going to talk more about kind of some of the experiences specifically for students. And I'm going to invite my colleagues Bree Wen and Natasha Bennett from our Student Center Design shop at SJI to talk more about this.
Thanks, Susan. So yeah, our team does a lot of work with colleges around connecting students to basic needs and benefits and supports, and that includes SNAP E&T programs. And so we wanted to just touch on some common obstacles that we've seen that can make it more difficult for students to access these programs. And so these could be helpful to keep in mind as you start thinking ahead about building out your own programs. So we sometimes see obstacles that can come from the way a program is structured or how it's implemented. And that includes what types of policies are in place. A key structural issue that we sometimes see are staff capacity constraints. So if staff members aren't able to dedicate enough time to the program, it can really make it hard for them to reach out to students and to provide that type of assistance that students might need. Just thinking back to the Hope Center survey finding that Susan just mentioned, you know, that over 50% of the students in the survey didn't apply for supports because they didn't know how. Having staff who can really reach out and help students navigate and provide that dedicated support is really important. Another issue that we sometimes see is programs not really having an incoming pipeline of students or a way to connect students to the program or some kind of structure in place that would allow staff and faculty to refer students to the program. So a college might have a program, but without ways to let students know about it, it can end up being like the best kept secret. So as you're building out your program, it's helpful to think about how to establish that wider awareness at the college. And another thing to keep in mind is to make sure that the program is structured in a way that aligns with students' needs. And sometimes we don't quite see that alignment. You know, for example, students might really need help with textbooks or certification exam fees or tools or equipment, but the program might not be prioritizing or offering these supports. So the alignment piece is really important to think about. There can also be some process obstacles where students might have to go through multiple steps just to be able to get enrolled or access supports, like filling out long forms or multiple forms. And we know that the more steps that a student has to take, or the longer they have to wait to get a response or take that next step, the higher the likelihood that they might not continue through the whole process. So thinking about how to make the processes and the way to access the program, how to make all of that student friendly. For example, making help or appointments available, during the hours when a busy student or a working student might be able to meet. So thinking about how to make those types of ways of accessing the program student friendly can be really helpful. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Natasha.
Thanks, Bree. So just a couple of other common challenges or obstacles that we wanted to touch base on with you today really have to do around what students are aware of and how they might perceive it or how it might benefit them. So a really common challenge that we've seen at colleges with SNAP E&T programs is that students aren't aware that the program exists. And often they aren't aware that they can access these kinds of supports at their college. And even if they have heard about it or they saw a flyer or something along those lines, they don't always really know what it can do for them. And so that thought bubble, I didn't realize my college had these supports available, kind of speaks a little bit to that. And to my colleague Bree's point, being able to describe the program in a way that helps them think about what it can do for them and how they can fit into these supports can be really helpful. So students attend college, to take classes. And so sometimes they may not really be thinking about college as a source or a hub for benefits and resources. So it might not even occur to them to explore their college campus for something along these lines. And they may not know that there are actually staff who are there who can help connect them to those kinds of benefits and resources. The other kind of challenges that we've seen is that it's really hard, especially when it comes to SNAP and SNAP E&T, to describe things in a way that kind of resonates with students, in a way that students can walk away with some kind of understanding. And so especially with a program like this, where offerings can be really helpful, but the requirements and the value it can bring might be a little confusing. It can be really helpful to think about how to design your communications in a way that's going to stick with students. So the other kind of important aspect of helping students make sure that they are aware of the program or aware that those supports might be available to them and how they might be able to access it is, think about what students are thinking about every day. Students not only have to know that those resources are available to them and how to apply, but they also will have to be the ones to reach out. So even if you've done a great job making sure that students know about it, there's still kind of that extra step that students may have to take. So in those scenarios where students might be the ones to have to reach out, it can limit access for students. They have a lot going on in their lives between their schoolwork, their families. Some of them might also be working full or even part-time. And that can be really challenging for them to reach out. We've heard quite a lot from our work speaking directly to students who know that they might need to do something or fill out a form, but they just don't have the time or the bandwidth to really get that in or to really complete it. So those kind of are two, I think, really important aspects that you can think about ahead of time as you're building or growing your program. And that's kind of in addition to working to address any structural process obstacles that my colleague Bree just talked about. And I will go ahead and turn it back over to Susan and Bob.
Thanks, Bree and Natasha. You guys are a hard act to follow. Very, very knowledgeable about student-centered design and behavioral science tools. So I'm kind of keeping with that same theme. I think it's important to think about, who your prospective participants are for SNAP E&T. And we might make some assumptions about, kind of what they're thinking and what they're capable of doing, what their bandwidth is as participants in your program. We might assume that they're, thinking thoughtfully, that they have, some long-term plans and everything, things they're thinking ahead about. You know, that if you send them a letter or give them some written instructions, that they're actually going to, you know, take the time to read those and understand them, and you know, think about, you know, what opportunities that E&T can offer them. You know, and if you think they're really motivated, they're going to take some quick action to, you know, do the right thing and, you know, enroll in training, you know, find a job, you know, and continue to follow up on their appointments, making sure they keep their appointments, you know, as needed throughout the program and process. You know, and the fact that they are, you know, as a SNAP recipient, may need to track their participation and make sure they're participating enough in the program. They not be, you know, be able to do that, or might be thinking right. So it's, like I said, it's always good to think about that and not assume that the participants are, you know, again, have the bandwidth to do some of these things. Next slide. So again, they're in a mindset where they're going through some crisis or something in their lives, some things that are happening that, you know, are you know, really put them in a scarcity mindset. You know, they're counting the days between paychecks, living paycheck to paycheck. They may be late on their rent, late on bills. They may be receiving, you know, phone calls from collection agencies. If they have a broken down car, you know, how are they going to get that car fixed? You know, so these are things that, you know, kind of maybe on their mind that, again, may not be given the ability to kind of act as we think they might be acting to continue in the program and really do it well. Next slide. So like, you know, Susan had mentioned before that, you know, really there's no need to, you know, create new programs or to create a whole new marketing campaign to get, you know, people that might be eligible for SNAP E&T in that program and enrolled in SNAP E&T. You can look no further than to your current student body and find folks that would be a good fit for SNAP employment and training. You know, you can review your FAFSA data review and look at folks that are applying for financial assistance. If you have a food bank on your campus, or you know where there's a food bank, that's where these folks might be going to get help, get additional support, and then reach out to other community partners that you may already have a relationship with, and folks like I'm sorry, partners like people that help people with finding housing, utility help, things like that. So again, there's connections out there where you can look to your own student body to find potential participants in SNAP employment and training. Next slide. And we know that in SNAP E&T that community colleges play a vital role in that program. You know, frankly, it's the SNAP agency doesn't have the connections or the resources to really help folks get into the labor market. And we know that colleges have those connections. They're tapped into the labor market demands. They know what jobs are in demands and can steer people in the right direction as far as, you know, what training to receive so they can get a job quickly. They have the connections to the career pathways so that, you know, people are not getting into jobs that are dead-end jobs, that they actually have a chance to, you know, to build on a career and get promotions and things like that, where they can actually, you know, sustain themselves and their family. And then we know community colleges also have programs that bridge to pre-college and college level work. So many of these students come in and they're not really ready to take college level work. So they may need some pre-college work, you know, courses to get them up to speed and everything, so they can take those college level courses. And then the connections the college have with, you know, work-based learning programs like apprenticeships and OJT, things like that, where the individual can actually receive some income while they're going to school, because many of these people, they have to make a choice. Are they going to be able to, you know, pay their rent, or, you know, are they going to go to school? And sometimes they don't have a choice. So programs like apprenticeships can really help somebody with, you know, earning some money while they're getting training. Next slide. And then, SNAP T&T can really fit into to the college environment. It really leverages those services and it goes beyond paying for tuition. It can really help, stabilize somebody in their enrollment. If they're receiving some support services that help them, go beyond the barriers that are keeping them from participating. It provides those extra supports like career navigation, college navigation, counseling services that really help them, be successful in their courses and stay in those courses and not drop out. It also allows eligible students to access SNAP to get that food security. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. In SNAP, there's a rule about student eligibility. It's very limited. In general, students that enrolled at least half-time in an institution of higher education are not eligible for SNAP because of the work requirements in SNAP. There are some exemptions. If they are under the age of 18 or over the age of 50, then that rule doesn't apply. If they have a disability that keeps them from working, the rule wouldn't apply. If they're receiving TANF, or if they're working 80+ hours on average per month, or if they're participating in a college work-study program, then those folks are exempt and can receive SNAP and attend school at the same time. But then you come to this last example here, or exemption, and that is if they're placed in the education activity through SNAP ENT or another ENT program that's approved by the state, then they can participate in SNAP and go to school at the same time. So that's very important. So SNAP ENT can, again, give them access to SNAP benefits as well as the additional services that SNAP ENT can provide. Next slide. And looking back at that, the exemption about work study, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, under the national emergency for the pandemic, it temporarily expanded the SNAP eligibility so that it includes folks that are not only eligible to participate in a federally financed work study program. I'm sorry, the rule before was that they had to actually be participating in a work study program. In other words, not only be eligible for it, but actually be participating and have a slot to be into. But under this expanded eligibility, they don't have to actually be participating, but just be eligible for that work study program. So be told that they're eligible, and then when a slot comes available, then they can participate in the work study. Or they could have, expected family contribution of 0 in the current academic year. And that also includes folks that are receiving the maximum Pell Grant. Next slide. So we saw this flyer from the Truckee Meadows Community College that we thought was a good example of how to get the word out about these expanded benefits for due to the pandemic. And we wanted to share this example with you. So this will be part of the slide deck that you receive. So it's a good way to get the word out to folks about these changes. Next slide. And then finally, I want to talk about, partnering with your SNAP ENT agency. It's important to have that good relationship and good partnership with the agency. Usually during the onboarding process, the SNAP agency will share a partner handbook with you, and it's good to look that over and make sure that you get any questions about that handbook answered right up front. It's also good to establish a good point of contact at the SNAP agency so that you can kind of talk through some issues, make sure you get your questions answered. And it really helps streamline the process for, managing your data and making sure that you're meeting the reporting requirements. And of course, also the invoicing too, the invoicing and billing process. And then working with the SNAP agency to make sure that the process that you're using and that they accept are, kind of mutually agreed upon, within the contracts that they do and the agreements that they do with you for SNAP ENT. Next slide. So again, we want to provide you some real world examples, and we have someone here from Lorraine Community College in Ohio, Marissa Verna-White, who's going to talk to you about some strategies they're using to connect students to benefits. Marissa?
Thank you, Bob. Hi, everybody. I'm Marissa Vernon White, as mentioned. I'm at Lorain County Community College, which is about a half an hour to the west of Cleveland, Ohio. We are a community college that's known for really strong community connections, a strong understanding of our local fabric of our families and the students that we serve, and really we're always looking for new ways to support our students and make sure that we're partnering with institutions outside of ourselves to find new ways to do that. So I do have a few slides here that have some overview. One of the things that I want to share before I get into specific details is that this work is not necessarily new to Lorain County Community College, but it has evolved over time, and certainly the pandemic has set that on fire, right? For many institutions, we're noticing that the need is just so great, and many families and students, their financial situations are changing very rapidly and unexpectedly as we continue to move through the disruption. So a little bit of background on Lorain County Community College. We have an advocacy and resource center we get a lot of questions about. It is actually modeled off of a unit at Amarillo College. We are very good friends with Amarillo College and have adopted many of their practices to build our own advocacy and resource center, which really pulls together all of the different pieces that students need to be able to access basic needs and public assistance programs while attending college. But this work is not necessarily new to us. We have been doing basic needs work at the college under the umbrella of something called Women's Link, actually for about 30 years. And so we've kind of taken that model and put all of these services into that ARC umbrella, which is really how we work with students very holistically. So specifically to the SNAP program, I just wanted to note that we actually have two different SNAP partnerships. Obviously for us as an institution, the ENT program is the one that probably aligns the closest with what we already do, which has already been talked about in terms of training and getting students connected to employment. But we also have something called a SNAP outreach grant, where we are actually not necessarily the recipient, but we are a partner in our job and family services and one of our local food banks that really is designed to promote awareness and access to SNAP. So kind of both of these things in tandem with the ENT and with the SNAP outreach is really how that works together for us. And we also have a food pantry as part of that larger ARC umbrella, which gives us access to a lot of our students who are experiencing food insecurity and obviously welcomes these level of connections as well. So go ahead and move to the next slide. So one of the things that we are always trying to do is to introduce our students to the possibility that they may be eligible for SNAP or SNAP EMT. So I think one of the things that I've noticed colleagues at some other higher education institutions get really hung up on, well, what if they don't qualify and how do we screen them? And, how would we know that a student might be eligible? And you kind of get stuck in the weeds with this. One of the things that we had determined early on was that if we're connecting students to SNAP and we're connecting students to our job and family services through what we offer on campus and making that warm handoff and have enough working knowledge of how these systems intersect, that the job and family services entity, the caseworkers, the case managers are then able to do that screening. So we as a higher education institution are just really trying to kind of put together all of these pieces to make sure that students are getting warmly handed off in terms of reverse referrals. So one of the things that came out of our SNAP outreach was a family pantry pack. So as I mentioned, we already have a pretty full-scale food pantry on campus known as Commodore Cupboard, but really wanted to reach families that maybe we haven't reached before who were in need of help. And so this was essentially run by our outreach specialist. And you can see on here that it was really no strings attached. It was come on down. We have groceries for, a week for you. We have family food pantry. It was really just promoted as a way for our students to kind of bulk up their food stocks at home and to organize their pantry while they're raising families while attending school. So you can see on here that it was the emergency aid recipients with a 0 EFC were the target population for that. So that data comes through our financial aid team. We actually don't share that with our ARC team, but they were the ones who essentially invited the students to this and said, you know, you can pick up food, it's groceries for a week, no strings attached. So you can see here that 89 students then followed through to pick these up. Now, where the data becomes a little bit unclear for us is that we actually have so many different layered initiatives at LCCC to get students funneled to SNAP that it becomes difficult to actually determine which one was the one that actually got them, you know, to follow through on the application or to work back with their case manager. But this essentially gave our outreach specialists 89 new families, 89 new students with whom to then work and to work back to see if additional support was actually needed. So I thought that was a really great outreach, kind of low intimidation factor, but also got us connected with individuals that we suspected might be eligible for SNAP. So the next slide. So a few things that I've noticed in my experience, and again, I don't work as a social worker. I have purely worked in higher education. And so learning both of these systems and kind of putting the pieces together, I completely agree with the statements that were made earlier about the fact that we are sharing these individuals and these families. In a community such as ours, we know that students that are considered low income on the FAFSA, receiving financial aid from the institution, working through short-term training programs and things like that, we know that those are the same students who are also on the caseloads of our local partners in our county. And so really what we have tried to do, like I said, is kind of layer on these different pieces in order to strengthen how we're actually getting students back to job and family services. So colleges, from my vantage point, can be really really helpful to students and to their partners in the community by helping with some of the documentation pieces, helping students access the things that they may need to be able to access SNAP or other public assistance program benefits. That is one of the things that really appears to be obvious to some of us that work in higher education, but is not obvious to a student who's trying to navigate these different systems. So things like, you know, how do you get your schedule and who's going to need that? And even having us have the awareness to say, you know, I'm pretty sure if you're on this public assistance program, they're actually going to need to see your schedule. So here's how you find it. And this is what you're going to want to print off and actually take, and have an understanding of how that actually flows through a different organization is very, very helpful. The financial aid award letters, all of us toss around verbiage like the 0 EFC, but what does that mean to students? And do they put 2 and 2 together that their financial aid package actually is demonstrative of them being able to get additional supports? So being able to blend those things together so that if a student gets their financial aid letter, it's also noting on there that you may be eligible for other things based on the fact that you are the 0 EFC. The attendance verification is one of the things that I've noticed students need a lot of help navigating. So students who are on multiple public assistance programs, you know, may periodically need to verify that they're still making academic progress, that they're still enrolled, and having a good understanding of some of those pieces and then being able to make that explicit to our students is really helpful as well. Like I said, assisting students with locating what they need easily is so, so important. One of the things that we actually have in our ARC is we have a scanning kiosk that allows students who already have a file with Job and Family Services to pull up their file and actually scan in documentation. So one of the things that we try to do at our campus is to really make the campus the center of that student and family's life, so that almost everything else that they need to facilitate can be done on campus. That's not to take away from our local partners, that's to support our local partners. So if a student isn't, you know, so that they're not going all over the county, going to their caseworker and then to class and then to childcare and then to the school, we kind of center all of that within the community college environment, knowing that that's a place where we're going to be reaching individuals who are training for different forms of employment. We ask questions about public benefits everywhere. And one of the reasons why we do that is because we're always trying to get a handle on which ones are our students utilizing that we need to understand better, and which ones of our students might need to be connected. So if a student is demonstrating to us that they have high need through their interactions in the ARC or through their financial aid applications, we want to be able to know who is already taken care of and plugged in with that system versus who needs that level of outreach to be able to couple some of these programs together to be able to achieve their education. We did some of this work early on when the SNAP waiver requirements had changed. I think that was January of 2021. Eventually, the federal partners kind of came together, and students that had the zero EFC did get something from the U.S. Department of Education explaining that they may qualify for SNAP benefits. We had actually already sent something to those students, though. We had identified about 4,000 who were enrolled with us, who based on their FAFSA data either had the zero EFC or the federal work study eligibility, and proactively reached out to them to let them know that the waiver had changed and that they may in fact be eligible for food assistance. That's not to promise that they would be, but that's at least to give them that heads up. And I think those are some of the extra things that colleges can do to really help support, the joint work that we're all doing. Is, the borders get a little blurry at times, but I think that's okay because we all then have working knowledge of how to help students navigate multiple systems at the same time. I think that's the end of my slides in there. But just kind of a closure on the LCCC work around this. We have been a SNAP ENT provided site for about 2 to 3 years. Of course, the pandemic has had some level of disruption to that. But many of the things that, and keep going back to what was shared at the beginning of the webinar, many of the things that we provide to all of our students are things that directly align to the ENT program. So things like, an assigned academic advisor, career support, emergency aid, access to books, tuition, things like that. And so this was actually, once we figured out how to make this work at our college, and of course it's not perfect, we're still working with our state entities to smooth it out. This did become a very viable option to think of ourselves as an ENT site because we are doing much of the work that the other non-college sites are doing as well.
Thank you, Marissa. I really appreciate that, sharing that information with us. You've taken some really important steps, I think, to help improve success and really get connected to the students and help stabilize their situations. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. So I think that's about it for us. We did want to, point you to some resources that you can use to help learn more about SNAP ENT. We've got the SNAP ENT program toolkit, and we've got the link there for that, as well as many, many resources that are been accumulated on the Snap to Skills website. As you may or may not know, Seattle Jobs Initiative has been involved in the Snap to Skills project since 2015, and we've built a lot of and accumulated a lot of good resources and information on the Snap to Skills website. So I encourage you to go to that website and look, see what they have to offer. Next slide. So we want to take time now to see if anybody has any questions for our speakers today, and also we have some links here to get more information from the speakers if you don't think of any questions today. But again, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. And if you're shy, you can put your questions in the chat.
And real quick, I will just add, because I think I saw a couple of messages come in. This session and the PowerPoint slides, the session's being recorded, the PowerPoint slide, they'll both be available to you all on our ACCT website under our SNAP ENT initiatives page. And you'll be able to see the links and everything. We're happy to make that available to you if you need to see it after as well, or individually if you want to follow up. So just to make sure you all knew, this will be available to you all after. we have an even more shy group than last time.
Well, we hope this information has been helpful to you, but of course, we're going to still be here to offer individual technical assistance to the cohort members. Both Susan and I are making ourselves available to do some coaching with you guys. So again, it's good to have you here. And if you have any questions, please let us know. I don't know if anybody else has any final words. Camille, go ahead.
I'll ask a question.
Right.
Marissa, when you were speaking, I think you said that there was a kiosk where students could upload documents, and I may have missed it, but do you guys have a way that you can verify a student's eligibility for SNAP yourself, or do you have to contact your partner at the welfare office for that?
Yeah, so we generally have that go through the welfare office. So they have been trained. Our ARC team gets regular training and follows, legislative updates and changes in criteria. But for the most part, we are actually not certifying any benefits or really even screening students for benefits. What we're trying to do is really provide the assistance for students to access them. We provide the help for them to get the documentation that they might need depending on whatever service it is that they're trying to access. But we have largely kept the actual screening and the kind of the full case management work. We have left that largely up to our community partners. One of the reasons why we have done that is mostly because we don't want to lead a student inaccurately. We don't want to make promises. We have, like many of you who are social workers or work in public assistance spaces that are on this webinar, you know how difficult it can be to keep up even with your own regulatory changes and different ways of doing things. We have a very similar experience in higher education as well. So it becomes challenging to kind of monitor both, U.S. Department of Ed financial aid guidelines and changes in state policy and things like that. And so we don't want to mess that up for a student, and we don't want to mess that up for our community partners either. So we have working knowledge of it. We know how to take students through the process, but the final determinations, we do actually rely on our community partner to do that. And I would also say too that we have a great working relationship with Lorain County Job and Family Services in that we do share information back and forth. However, they have some very strong practices around having the students and the shared student and client provide much of their own information. And so periodically we're reconciling our lists for ENT. And if they notice something, hey, did the student, I just got notice that the student may have dropped down to half time. Is that really the case? Things like that. But largely they are collecting documents directly from the client as opposed to us doing as much of the record keeping. And that's kind of something that when we were working through becoming partners with ENT, we kind of worked that through. We don't want something to slip through the cracks on our end that's going to impact reporting or a student's benefits through the social service agency. So we're very much a partner in that, but we're also not necessarily tracking every single thing because we know that we have a partner who's also tracking that for their purposes. So, and I find that that's one of the things that that other higher education institutions get a little bit hung up on is like, well, how on earth are we gonna, if a student drops this class or they change their major and they're now not eligible, and that's certainly possible and that does happen. However, if your community partner, it's important to ask, what is your community partner actually monitoring? Because you may find that they're monitoring things too, and you don't actually need to duplicate as much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Any other questions? If not, I will turn it back over to Steve for some announcements and then to close those out.
Thanks very much, Jose. I just wanted to add, put a couple of upcoming events on your radar. First of all, I just want to say thank you to our presenters. That was some fantastic information, and some of our partners were extremely excited and really want to push this message out. So, once the session is up, we're gonna definitely work that out through our networks. But there's a couple of events. The first one I want to mention, and if you have not already done so, there is a symposium that APHSA is putting on. And Brandy, I don't know if you want to add anything about this, but it's June 15th and 16th. You've received some emails around signing up. We will send out one final reminder, but I wanted to take the opportunity, since we were all here together today, to, if you have not signed up for that, please do so. You can reach out to myself or Jose. And that's June 15th and 16th. And it is part of a larger summit, June 12th through 15th, and that's going to be in Arlington. So Brandy, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything about dates or topics or anything else.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to, Steve. Thanks so much. First of all, so excited to see all your shiny, happy faces on the webinar. It was some really great content. As Steve said, the APHSA Workforce Symposium is going to be held June 15th and 16th in Arlington, Virginia, in conjunction with the APHSA Health and Human Services Summit. It's going to be a really good opportunity to get together and network with a diverse group of service providers, human services leaders, and workforce development stakeholders, including other community colleges and community action agencies, to discuss ways to improve access to meaningful career pathways and support child and family well-being for the communities that you serve. I've dropped some information. There's a flyer. There's a link to the flyer. If you have any questions specifically about the Workforce Symposium, I put my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. Thanks, Steve.
And just as a quick reminder on this symposium, APHSA has graciously agreed to cover one delegate from each institution in this cohort to attend the symposium, and they'll cover travel, lodging, and everything. So I know we have several of you who have already given us the name of your delegate. If you haven't already, please get it to us soon, because APHSA will need to finalize those details in the coming week.
Perfect. And the other event we want to talk about is a different convening that we are putting on at ACCT, and that is going to be in Washington, D.C., August 17th through the 19th. That date has been modified, so and that was based on feedback from the institutions. I think it had revolved around fall semester starts. So the new dates are August 17th through the 19th. And that will be our ACCT convening for this project. Our next webinar is scheduled for March 24th. So make sure you have that on your calendar. And if there's anyone that needs to be added to that, please let us know. And we will be starting individual state cohort meetings in May to debrief and discuss the next steps. Jose mentioned this recording will be up by next week, and along with the slide deck. And I'm not sure, Jose, is there anything else about the convening in August, or?
Nope, you've covered it all. You'll be getting more details from us as it gets closer, but we just want to make sure you got the updated date based on the feedback you all gave us about shifting it earlier, and just putting it there as a save the date. As we get into spring and summer, we'll be sending you all more details, travel arrangements, lodging, a little bit more in terms of the content as we get much closer. But just so you get a sense, we'll probably get started that first day in the afternoon, have a full day the second day, and then the third day we'll finish up probably by noon, just for our closing breakfast area, closing morning time. But that's what you should be expecting on the lookout, and you'll get more details from us as we finalize the logistics for that event.
Thanks, Jose. And once again, I just would like to thank our speakers, but also all of you for joining us for this webinar. If there are no other questions, I will give you a few minutes back of your day, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. And thanks so much.